Welcome to another episode of Money in the Bank with Frank. Last time, Ed Rogers joined me. We talked about a sugar that didn't act like sugar. We talked about tagatose, something that tastes like sugar, bakes like sugar, and yet seemed to behave very differently in the body. We talked about the promise, the science, and the frustration that a product with so much potential was still being held back by the label. Back then, the big question was simple. If this stuff is real, why isn't it everywhere? Well, now we have our next chapter. Since our last conversation, the FDA has moved in a way that could materially change the commercial future of tagatose. And that takes this story from a science conversation to a business conversation. Because once the regulatory barriers start to move, the excuses start to disappear. Now the question is no longer just whether tagatose works. The question is whether Bonumose can scale it, sell it, and turn a long-fought idea into a mainstream reality. So today, I'm welcoming back Ed Rogers, CEO of Bonumose. We're going to talk about what changed, what it means, and what happens next. I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to the conversation. Thanks. Ed, welcome back to Money in the Bank with Frank. How are you?
Fantastic. Great to be back with you, Frank. I think it was about 8 months, maybe 9 months ago that we last spoke.
Yeah. It was it's interesting times back then, right? We had upheaval in the administration. And even prior to that, you guys had been hit with a added sugar label on your product. I am so excited. Thank you so much for coming back and checking back in with us because it's not often that you kind of see the future and get through it.
Well, I think when we spoke, it was October of last year, and it was right before we got some good news, awesome news from the FDA, which was thereafter confirmed just a few months ago this year. We're now speaking on June 30th, 2026. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. Let's get into it.
Great. So back when we talked last, we were talking about tagatose as a rare sugar and how it doesn't spike the glycemic index. We could go on and on about what it is. People can look at the last show and recognize that. What was kind of difficult was that you guys got slapped with a capricious label that you fought in court. And where did it go from there?
Yeah, sure. So as a reminder, tagatose has all these properties that are similar to dietary fiber, a lot of positive health properties that I can get into. And I think we got into a lot in the last podcast. Um, Yet it has the taste and texture of regular sugar, and which makes it, a really interesting ingredient for reformulation because there's no negative attributes to it. Um, it is technically a monosaccharide, and the FDA had a labeling rule that said all monosaccharides had to be classified as added sugars on the nutrition facts panel, regardless of their health effect. They had made an exception for allulose, which is also a very interesting alternative to sugar. Not quite as sweet as tagatose, but nonetheless, the FDA had made an exception for allulose. And when they announced that exception, if you applied those rules to tagatose, tagatose should have been accepted also, should have gotten the same exemption. But the FDA reached the opposite conclusion. And so we had to fight them in court. And when we last spoke, we had already defeated them in court, in federal court. There had been a ruling in August of 2024 that the FDA was wrong, as you termed. It was arbitrary and capricious. But when you and I spoke in October of 2025, the FDA still had not followed what the court told them to do, was just ignoring it. And in October 2025 was, I guess I need to tell you about all the things that went into the ultimate decision we got. And so I'll do that. But shortly after we spoke in October 2025, we did get a decision from the FDA that tagatose was going to be exempted and now is exempted from being classified as added sugars on nutrition facts panels. So it clears up the confusion that consumers had. Um, you want me to talk about what went into that?
Yeah, tell me the story because, everyone likes a good origin story.
Well, you know, the origin. Um, so I'll tell you the story of the FDA. You know, so um, we defeated the FDA in August of 2024, but they still did not change the labeling, and even though we were having dialogue with them, it was basically a one-way street. There was no information coming back to us, and when the administration changed in January of 2025, the labeling was still what it was, even though a federal judge, by the way, an Obama appointee, had ruled against the Biden FDA and said that the labeling was wrong. So when the new administration came in, we made outreach to the new leadership of FDA and HHS, and had a much different reaction than we had previously. So I'm gonna name a few names if it's all right. Do you mind if I name a few
No,
names?
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a gentleman by the name of the Deputy Commissioner of Human Foods named Jim Jones. I don't mean to malign the man, but he was the Deputy Commissioner of Human Foods and under the Biden administration. And I remember approaching him at a conference in 2024 to introduce myself. I went over to introduce myself, and he stuck his hand up and said, "I'm not talking to you." And he would refuse to even have a dialogue with me. Well, fast forward to May of 2025, I tracked down his successor, Kyle Diamantis, at a conference. I went specifically to the conference to meet Kyle, found him in the green room before he went on to speak, and walked up and introduced myself. And Kyle said, "Hey, Ed, sit down. Let's talk." And we had a very professional and dialogue in which he was quite receptive to hearing new things and learning about the issues. And he was aware of the issues from having been briefed beforehand. So just diametrically opposed responses. Ultimately, through meetings with Kyle and others, it was Kyle who wrote us the letter in November of 2025 to give us the exemption. And by the way, Kyle Diamantis is now the acting commissioner of the FDA. At the time, he was the deputy commissioner for the Human Foods Program. So there's a lot more, and I'm happy to get into, but I got to give huge credit to um, Deputy Commissioner Kyle Diamantis, acting Commissioner Kyle Diamantis, for the way he handled this issue.
That's great. That's great to see when someone steps up and actually helps enforce what was put in writing. Um, y it's just interesting that, we had that hold up for such a long time with the added sugar labeling, and now that you've gotten past it, we get past the science, and now we get into the potential for commercialization. So, how does that look? How do you now that we've gotten past the barrier of labeling, have you seen any of your bigger supporters starting to work with you on that?
Yes. So prior to the labeling change, there was a demand problem. The labeling, the added sugars labeling, created a practically an insurmountable hurdle to adoption because imagine you have something that's got health benefits, doesn't have the negatives that are associated with excess consumption of regular sugar, got all these positive health benefits like dietary fiber does, and yet you still have to call it on the label sugar. That's just going to cause confusion in the marketplace. Consumers are already jaded enough with, feel like they're being lied to. It was just insurmountable, and frankly, I think the prior FDA knew that. And um, my belief is that the prior FDA did not want a healthier alternative to sugar in the food supply. Um, Now we have a supply problem where probably we would say, based upon what we're hearing from our commercial partners, that the demand is around 20 times what our plant capacity is. Um, and that's still a problem where we need to produce more. And so we are in active discussions with production partners that would allow for scale up. Um, we have a certain limited capacity here in Virginia. Um, our our tagatose is made from American farmer grown crops, starch. There's nothing that limits there's nothing inherent in the process that limits the scale up. It's just a matter of we got to get more production partners online, and so we're in active conversations with several potential production partners that have access to starch and are familiar with the unit operations that turn that starch with enzymes into sweeteners and now into something that is a healthy sweetener. Um, I will say this may be relevant to some of your listeners who are farmers. Um, we're very happy about the fact that we use American farmer grown crops. So corn, wheat, potato, anything that makes starch, even the yellow pea. Um, Instead of using, like they do in China, using lactose or and God knows what else. Um, so this starch with our enzymes can be very efficiently turned into tagatose at extremely high conversion yields using the process that we developed in house. That is really a breakthrough in how enzymes are used. And I want to point out that we use non-GM starch. We do not have to, but that's what we choose to use. And so we think part of what we are doing is increasing the demand for non-GM starch, for starch that is grown um, without having to be Roundup Ready starch, which is, a concern to some people. Um, so yes, we had a demand problem before. We have a supply problem now. We're doing what we can to address that supply problem.
Got it. And, whenever I go to a restaurant, get a cup of coffee, uh, you see all the different packets, yellow, green, blue, white, brown. When are we gonna see a Tagatose packet?
Yeah. All right. So I don't know the answer to that question. Our focus is to uh, scale up the production, um, and to that involves collaboration partners. We can't do it all. And our main focus within that value chain is on the enzymes, making the enzymes as efficient and as inexpensive as possible so that tagatose can be made in a way that's affordable to the mass market. And most sugar is consumed already in foods. So like at a restaurant, it'd already be in whatever your dessert or other foods, sauces and etc. Or in the grocery store in packaged foods. Most sugar is actually not consumed in those packets that you will see on a restaurant or cafe table. Um, so that's not where our focus has been. Um, that said, we do sell tagatose through Amazon. We do sell tagatose through Walmart.com. So it is available to purchase for anybody that wants to use it at home. And we think that could be an interesting business on its own because it does taste so much like regular sugar. You can put it in your coffee. You can sprinkle it on your cereal. You can bake cookies with it. And so in terms of, distributing it in restaurants in those packets, it's not on it's not in our immediate plans, but I could see that being something that may happen in the future. We're thankful that one of our distribution partners, one of our close strategic partners, is one of the sugar companies that has distribution to all of those restaurants.
Right. So, are your plants centrally located throughout the United States, or are you located more I thought you were on the East Coast, more on the East Coast right now?
Yeah, so we're in Virginia. We're in the Charlottesville, Virginia area. Um, the large scale plants where tagatose can be made most efficiently and at the lowest price point is where corn is made. And so that's likely going to be the Midwest. I
Yeah,
almost said the
places like
Middle East.
Iowa, and have you engaged with any of the economic development councils there, or any of the bring manufacturing back to America type?
Not so much the economic development councils, but with the starch companies. So very heavily involved in discussions with the starch companies. Um, a little bit of dialogue with the administration regarding the idea of does it make sense for the U.S. government to support rare sugar production? That's what tagatose is. It's a rare sugar. It occurs in nature in small quantities, very tiny quantities. But um, I can make a straight faced argument that tagatose production, rare sugar production, is as important as rare earth mineral production. It is important to um, American health that tagatose be used in a large scale way. Also allulose and other alternatives, but tagatose is particularly interesting. And given that we make it from American farmer grown crops, then it's important to America in that way. And also it's a bulwark against China, which controls, frankly, dominates the alternatives to sugar market. So we are seeking to see if there's interest in supporting the capital expense and the offtake of tagatose, if there's interest on behalf of the federal government. I'm not saying that there is yet, but that is something that we're exploring.
You mentioned a couple of things about rare sugars and the difficulties through the countries, and as we know, supply chain matters now. Where does tagatose, or actually at this point, Bonumose, I believe you said that you guys can also produce allulose, other rare sugars. Where on the supply chain, where's the bottleneck in the supply chain for adoption other than scaling up the capacity? Is there discussion issues with other companies, CPG, food?
The bottleneck is large scale production. So, I mean, that
So
is the
there's
bottleneck.
demand now, and now it's just a production problem.
There, there is absolutely demand. The issue is that, and it's the classic chicken or egg thing, but uh, large food producers are unlikely to bet big on any ingredient, including tagatose, until they know that it is available at large scale. And so that's what we need to do, is to demonstrate that not only is there a pathway to large scale production, but there actually is large scale production. So, our plant today is multi tons per day, but that's really, really small when it comes to the needs of food companies. So that is the bottleneck. Supply, production capacity is the bottleneck. There is no other um, impediment to scaling. There's plenty of starch. There's plenty of enzymes. There's plenty of demand, and tagatose is practically a drop-in replacement for regular sugar, and so it's not a matter of reformulating existing recipes. Um, so production of tagatose at large scale is the bottleneck. And what's interesting is that when you get to massive scale, I mean the scale of high fructose corn syrup production, that's where there are existing production assets, production assets that turn starch into high fructose corn syrup that can be reoriented or redeployed to turn that starch into tagatose at the massive scale. So we're kind of between a nice small scale at our plant in Virginia and the massive scale where there are production assets that exist, and we need um, to bridge to that massive scale. I don't know if I said that very well, but I can come back to the point of um, production is the bottleneck.
How do you price against sugar? And I know that as you scale up, maybe the price comes down, but how do you price tagatose versus allulose versus traditional sugar?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've heard very few requests for having having tagatose be priced at the same price as sugar. I think the better comparison is tagatose compared to other alternatives to sugar. And so that would be compared to sugar alcohols, often called polyols, like erythritol, xylitol, maltitol, mannitol. Um, these are all, let's say maybe 3 or 4 times the cost of regular sugar, but are used in massive quantities themselves. So whereas sugar is somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 million metric tons a year global production, sugar out and high fructose corn syrup is maybe, let's say, 15 million metric tons a year of global production. Sugar alcohols are in the, say, million or 2 million metric tons a year of global production, um, even though they are at a higher price point than regular sugar. So that's really where we think that tagatose has a great story, because attractively priced compared to alternatives to sugar, uh, better functionality in food production, better taste, better health properties, just an all around better story than some other alternatives to sugar. And I'm not saying that tagatose would replace any of those entirely. I'm just saying that we stack up really well against some of those other alternatives.
I'm gonna pivot for a minute to the health aspect, again, to refocus on you see now so many people going on peptides like GLP-1s, GLP-2s, and retatrutide. You've got all these different GLPs in production now. You're starting to see people take a real focus on their own personalized health because these large language models are allowing them to sequence their genes and get an idea of what's good and bad in their bodies. And one of the things that I've spoken to someone at the uh, Brain Health Institute, as well as just random doctors, is like, have we even begun to see productivity gains based on healthier people? It's my understanding that tagatose is actually beneficial to health even outside of that. Is that right?
Yes. So now the FDA can be touchy about even the definition of healthy. Um, and that's a whole nother, story. But here's what the literature shows about tagatose, and frankly has shown for 30 years. Reminder to your audience that Bonumose did not invent tagatose. God invented tagatose. It was first made commercially about 30 years ago from lactose, milk sugar. And what Bonumose did was develop a better way of making it, a scalable way of making it. But here's what's known about tagatose. It is a prebiotic. Now, the FDA will not currently allow us to call it fiber, but all the good things that fiber does, tagatose does these things. So it's a prebiotic. It bypasses the small intestine, and about 80% of it gets to the large intestine, where this is sort of a technical term, but it is selectively fermented by the microbiota in the gut, meaning the good bacteria in your gut will consume tagatose, the bad bacteria will not. So tagatose actually inhibits the bad bacteria, feeds the good bacteria, and the good bacteria produce things called short chain fatty acids, which are beneficial to health. The most important of which is butyrate. Butyrate is associated with addressing leaky gut syndrome. It's associated with glutathione, which is important for detoxification. Um, it has some antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. So tagatose is doing these things. It's supporting positive gut health. Tagatose also, um, as a fiber-like material, um, stimulates GLP-1. So it stimulates it. Now, other fibers do this too, but so I'm not saying tagatose is unique. It does not simulate GLP-1 like the drugs do. It stimulates it. And so it maybe could be used in combination with GLP-1 drugs to reduce the need to reduce the dosage. Um, Tagatose has its own antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties. It's low calorie. It helps lower blood sugar levels. We've got an interesting post on Instagram where um, someone took their blood sugar on a continuous glucose monitor, took their blood sugar readings with sugar, and then took their blood sugar readings with the same amount of sugar, but also some tagatose, and it was a lower blood sugar reading. So tagatose helps bring down um, the blood sugar readings, the blood sugar effect of sugar and other ingredients. Same thing for insulin. There was a paper presented by Mondelez, the company that makes Oreo cookies and other things, at a conference I went to in November, where they showed this effect with insulin, that tagatose helps reduce the production of insulin when consumed with other sugars compared to the sugars alone. Tagatose also helps remineralize teeth. It does not um, it is not consumed by the bacteria in your mouth that produce acid, and so it does not cause tooth decay. That's recognized in federal regulations. Um, it actually helps break up dental plaque. There's even some dental products that use tagatose. Next time you go to the dentist, ask about what they're using to clean your teeth, and in some cases, you'll find out they're actually using tagatose to clean your teeth. So it's got all these positive health properties. Um, Not just not negative, and it also tastes so good that it can be a vector for other healthy food ingredients. It can make other healthy food ingredients taste good. That was the tragedy of having it labeled as added sugars. It just didn't make any sense at all, and it denied for a long time tagatose to the public.
I want to want to put my tinfoil hat on for a moment because you mentioned Mondelez, and it's very interesting to see that they actually are validating the product as well. You think about where Mondelez came from; they were a spin out of Philip Morris, which we all know as a tobacco company, but Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds um, have uh, been very dominant in our food pyramid and our food supply chain for a very long time. Um, they both have tremendous numbers of scientists on staff to figure out exactly what it's doing to the human body. So I'm happy to see that um, big food is taking an interest in the way that the body is synthesizing, I guess, these, tagatose as a whole.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes, and I'm not an expert at the genealogy of large food companies. I have heard this discussed probably most effectively by Callie Means, who is a special advisor to Secretary Kennedy. He talks about this. I am not an expert at this. And by the way, Callie Means was helpful to us in our effort to have the labeling changed, and was engaged in a dialogue with us. Um, so what I can say is that um, tagatose does it's not addictive. It's not one of those things where, I mean, it's great tasting. People will love to eat it. I have it every day. Um, I probably have more tagatose than anybody else. And by the way, I'm 95 years old, so you can tell the health benefits. Um, but it, um, it is not addictive. It doesn't cause you. It actually triggers the feeling of satiety, so it's not going to cause somebody to overeat. And that's I think one difference with what the former tobacco companies have been accused with.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, and I was just like pointing out that they've got really good scientists, and so if they think that it's better for you, they may be right. Uh, Ed, what does success look like for you in the next 24 months? Is it getting obviously additional capacity for factories, but like, what does success look like for you for the next 24 months?
Yeah,
Or
it's
even the next
100%.
year? Heck, a lot has happened the last year, right? So,
Yeah. So, our big goal up until getting this labeling change was we got to get the labeling change. So, what we want within the next 12 to 24 months, get large scale production online. When I say large scale production, I mean something that's, meaningfully larger than what we have here. Something where food companies are not going to worry that tagatose will run out. And then we can always, it's not hard to scale from there. So that's my focus, is let's get that done. Um, and as we're doing that, we are continuing to optimize the enzymes, optimize the production of the enzymes, which lowers the cost, optimize the strength of them, the way that they're utilized to turn starch into tagatose. And by the way, enzymes, a lot of people may not know what an enzyme is. Enzymes are protein. And so you take starch plus our proteins, and that creates tagatose. And we just want to make those proteins as fast and as strong and as low cost as possible along the way to having tagatose adopted by the mass market. That, there are lots of other things that I could name, but that is the main thing. I'm not going to say, hey, I want to see tagatose in XYZ chocolate bar or this cookie or this ice cream or this soft drink, because that will come. It is the large scale production.
Selfishly, I also wanna see all of those things. I remember being a kid, and the big comment was like, "You're gonna rot your teeth out." And we always thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if there was a sugar that helped you, stronger teeth, healthier, and it
Yeah.
seems like it's here. I mean, everyone talks about, well, not everyone, but there's a lot of people. You said Diamantes. There's a gentleman that has a podcast, and they talk about the singularity of all things that are kind of coming together right now. And the more I look at it, the more I see that there's so much opportunity right now, and in things that are better for you, and being able to focus on your own personal outcomes. And so selfishly, I do want tagatose
Yeah.
broadly.
Oh, and I'm fortunate because we make it here, and I have, perhaps the best access to tagatose of anybody around. And so, like I said, I have it every single day in my coffee. I have it at night. Sometimes I'll take it prophylactically before dessert so that I can, eat ice cream and not feel as guilty. And yeah, so I want to see it in all foods so that everybody has this equal access. Now, I want to caution, tagatose is not, it's not like tagatose is the only alternative to sugar. Um, and it's certainly not like tagatose is going to replace all sugar. There are some very interesting, I would say sweet proteins is a class of sweetener that is, that has a real place, especially when blended with tagatose. So
That's
here's a,
you know what, that's one thing I wanted to unpack as well. You mentioned that you said that if you mix a little bit of it in with the sugar, maybe it, or at the same time, before, after, what are you talking about with that?
yeah, well, so so there's two things there. One is that um, tagatose, through some mechanism, um, will blunt the impact of sugar or starch on your blood sugar. So when you consume sugar or starch with tagatose, tagatose has some mechanism by which it prevents that from getting into your bloodstream in the same way that it would otherwise. Um, and, but the other, what I was mentioning just now is that sweet proteins are a class. They're like, say, think stevia, think monk fruit. These are not sweet proteins, but sweet proteins are in the same class. Naturally occurring molecules that have extremely high sweetness compared to regular sugar. They blend really well with tagatose. Tagatose, I would say, makes them taste more like sugar. And here's the great, so tagatose is a great product, but if you were to take a typical soft drink and sweeten it entirely with tagatose, that's too much fiber-like ingredient to have at one time. It's just too much. It'd be too much for the system. And so what you do there is you blend tagatose with a sweet protein, and you can have 100% sugar reduction in a carbonated soft drink, and have something that's good for your gut and all around beneficial. So I want to make clear that we're not saying people should only think about tagatose. Tagatose will blend with other things, sugar, um, sweet proteins, other sweeteners in a way that allows for even greater sugar reduction than maybe tagatose could do on its own. And and that's where you get into some really exciting opportunities with ice cream, soft drinks, anything else that people love to consume, but that, maybe has too much of something they should not consume.
And you've had a interesting journey so far. It's taken, many years to get even as far as you've gotten, and you've had a lot of challenges along the way. Are there people along the way that that helped get you here that you want to mention? I know that you mentioned some people before, but
Well, yeah, okay. So there, I feel like I'm in an Oscars ceremony, too many to thank, but um and I'm going to say the following with all sincerity. I thank God every single morning. You know, I told my sons once that throughout the day you're going to get knocked to your knees. You might as well start off the day on your knees. And so that's number one. And thank my family and thank our shareholders who have been patient beyond measure with how long we had to fight that FDA issue and just the normal challenges of businesses. But in particular with this FDA issue, I've already thanked or and mentioned Kyle Diamantis, and he's doing a great job. And I know he's not like a household name, but top notch. I mentioned Kelly Means and thanked him. I want to thank Robert Kennedy also. And funny, my voice started changing right when I mentioned Robert Kennedy, who's he's known for having issues with his voice. Uh, I had the opportunity to talk to him for about 2 minutes, and he immediately understood and things happen quickly after that. So I'm grateful for that. There's a gentleman that I met with called Vince Haley in the White House, also very helpful. One of my law school classmates, Mike Eggy, was able to arrange for some meetings, and thankful to him. Um, Katya Plashensky, and I'm probably mispronouncing her name, but she's with the Make America Healthy Again organization, and she was able to set up some things that led to some things and led to some things. John Littell was the chief of staff for Governor Youngkin here in Virginia up until recently, and he also was made some phone calls for us. May I go on with just a few others? I promise I
sure,
won't name the whole phone book. Um,
sure.
Dana Smith and Elizabeth Brem with the firm of Siri Glimstead did really good work for us leading up to the change of the labeling. Philip Bay with Washington Global Advisors, James Lyons Weiler, many others. So these are just some folks who did take an interest in what we were doing and helped us in a key way. So uh, lots of folks. Frank, I know you made some phone calls too. Um, this is something that needed to be done, not just for our company, but for we believe for society, and we're thankful it got done.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ed. I mean, on behalf of, all the investors, I know that, you know, I like to invest in things that are not just good for you, but, make you feel good as well as do well for your pocketbook. So I'm hopeful that we can commercialize. But truly, I want to thank you for your persistence because again, outcomes and this is a productivity outcome for the future, right? These types of breakthroughs have been overlooked for such a long time, and now we have a way to validate it. So thank you so much for your help and your
Yeah.
steadfastness.
Yeah, and one more. I want to thank my co-founder Dan Wichelecki, who's our chief scientific officer and the inventor of our process, and that guy is relentless. And then we just have a fantastic team here at Bonumose. So they've been with us through the ups and downs, and now we're trying to make it happen in a bigger way. So I'm thankful to all of them as well.
Great. Well, thanks, Ed. Thanks for coming, and thanks for joining us on Money in the Bank with Frank.
All right, Frank.
Take care.